A $7.2 billion jet deal has just been scrapped. A key NATO member is stepping away from decades of transatlantic defense alignment. And at the heart of Europe, a shift is underway toward industrial sovereignty, strategic autonomy, and a defense posture that no longer assumes the United States will always be the center of gravity. Spain's decision to walk away from the F-35 fighter jet program isn't just a procurement change, it's a signal. A message that echoes across military bases, boardrooms, and diplomatic summits. This is not merely about replacing aging jets. It's about reconfiguring alliances, funding ecosystems, and reshaping Europe's place in a rapidly evolving global security architecture. Spain has officially abandoned plans to acquire the American-made F-35 Lightning II, suspending all preliminary discussions and issuing what amounts to a quiet but deliberate break with Washington's defense industrial complex. In its place, Madrid is directing an additional 10.5 billion euros in defense spending, equivalent to roughly $11.7 billion toward European-built platforms, including the fourth-generation Eurofighter Typhoon and the sixth-generation Future Combat Air System, or FCAS, a still-developing program spearheaded by France, Germany, and Spain itself. This reallocation isn't a budget cut. On the contrary, it's part of a broader effort to raise Spain's military expenditure to meet NATO's 2% of GDP target by 2025. But crucially, nearly 85% of that budget will now stay within European borders. What's unfolding here is more than a procurement choice. It's a litmus test of national sovereignty, economic leverage, and geopolitical posture. Spain's rejection of the F-35 sends a clear signal that the transatlantic defense model, long held as the backbone of NATO cohesion, is no longer taken for granted. And it comes at a time when U.S. allies across Europe are grappling with a volatile Washington, rising global multipolarity, and a defense landscape defined not only by hardware, but who controls the data, the supply chains, and the long-term industrial base. This is a story about jets, yes, but more so it's about power. How it's projected, who builds it, and who benefits from it. Spain's decision to walk away from the F-35 procurement program does not exist in a vacuum. It sits within a highly dynamic strategic context defined by competing industrial agendas, shifting geopolitical allegiances, and the accelerating push within Europe to decouple key defense capabilities from U.S. dependence. At the core of this shift is a reconfiguration of budget priorities and long-term capability planning, one that has wide-reaching implications for NATO cohesion, industrial policy, and Europe's defense readiness over the next 2 decades. The story begins with Spain's 2023 national defense budget, which earmarked 6.25 billion euros for fighter aircraft replacement, specifically to address the aging fleets of the Spanish Air and Space Force and the Navy. This allocation was seen as a likely gateway to the F-35 program. By that point, preliminary contacts had already been established, and a non-binding request for information had already been issued as far back as 2017. The expectation was that Spain would eventually pursue a 2-variant procurement, the F-35A for conventional land-based operations and the F-35B, the short takeoff and vertical landing model for the Navy's flagship vessel, the Juan Carlos I, which currently operates the AV-8B Harrier II. These jets are expected to be fully retired by 2030, creating a fixed deadline by which a replacement must be operational.
However, 2024 brought a strategic inflection point. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's administration announced an additional 10.5 billion euro in defense funding as part of its multi-year effort to bring Spain into compliance with NATO's 2% of GDP defense spending benchmark by 2025. Yet the crucial detail was not just the amount, but where that money would go. Over 85% of the expanded defense budget was pledged to be spent within Europe, a deliberate move to support domestic and continental defense industries. This allocation is incompatible with a major U.S. procurement, particularly one as high cost and high visibility as the F-35. The implication was clear. Spain was prioritizing industrial sovereignty and European integration over transatlantic hardware compatibility. This move did not go unnoticed in Washington. The U.S., under the Trump administration, had been aggressively pressuring NATO allies to increase defense outlays, not just to meet the 2% GDP guideline, but to push further toward 5%. Spain, with its long-standing welfare commitments and more cautious fiscal posture, publicly rejected this escalation. Sanchez's administration maintained that 2% was sufficient, especially if those funds were reinvested in European platforms that contributed to EU-wide strategic capabilities. The political clash culminated in harsh words from President Trump, who accused Spain of freeloading on NATO's collective security and even threatened retaliatory tariffs on Spanish exports in response. But beyond the political theatrics lies a deeper industrial strategy. Spain's move aligns with a broader continental trend toward defense decoupling and strategic autonomy. By redirecting funds toward programs like the Eurofighter Typhoon, developed jointly by Airbus, BAE Systems, and Leonardo, and the Future Combat Air System, currently under joint development with France and Germany, Spain is placing a long-term bet on a homegrown European military-industrial ecosystem. That bet comes with risk. FCAS is unlikely to reach operational capability before 2040, leaving a critical capability gap in both the Air Force and the Navy during the interim. But from Madrid's perspective, the trade-off is justified: sovereignty over dependency, even if it means operational gaps in the short term. What emerges then is a timeline of divergence, a defense procurement path that departs from US-centered NATO standardization and moves toward a Europe-first doctrine. Spain is not merely buying aircraft, it is investing in a restructured defense identity, one that favors continental interoperability, domestic job creation, and insulation from volatile US foreign policy cycles. Whether that vision can meet the operational demands of the next decade remains to be seen, but the macro-level signals are unambiguous. Spain is charting a course that prioritizes long-term industrial alignment over near-term fifth-generation capability. The hard data behind Spain's fighter jet decision reveals a layered and strategically complex picture, one that isn't just about stealth and speed, but about economics, capability trade-offs, and long-term industrial leverage. On the surface, Spain is walking away from the Lockheed Martin F-35 program, but under the hood, the country is recalibrating its entire defense procurement strategy through a mix of cost analysis, platform compatibility, and domestic industrial interests.
Let's begin with the aircraft themselves. The F-35A, the conventional variant, carries a unit cost of approximately 68.4 million euros. The F-35B, the short takeoff and vertical landing variant necessary for Spain's naval aviation requirements, is considerably more expensive at roughly 87.5 million euros per unit. These figures represent the most advanced fifth-generation aircraft currently in production globally, equipped with state-of-the-art sensor fusion, stealth capabilities, and an ecosystem of digital battlefield integration that places them far ahead of legacy fourth-generation aircraft. But that advantage comes with price, dependency, and political baggage. By contrast, the Eurofighter Typhoon, a 4.5-generation multi-role aircraft, averages around 90 million euros per unit in current acquisition contracts. Though not stealth-capable in the fifth-generation sense, the Eurofighter remains a robust platform, particularly in air superiority and interception roles. It is also heavily embedded in European defense manufacturing, involving Airbus, BAE Systems, and Leonardo. For Spain, this means not only local assembly and maintenance jobs, but direct industrial participation in a shared European aerospace base. Moreover, as a founding consortium partner, Spain already possesses logistics, training infrastructure, and operational familiarity with the Eurofighter platform. Then there's FCAS, the Future Combat Air System. Still in the conceptual and early development phase, FCAS is projected to be a sixth-generation fighter platform, bringing stealth, AI-driven avionics, loyal wingman drone integration, and cloud-based warfare systems into the European arsenal by approximately 2040. Although unit cost projections are speculative, early estimates suggest a figure well north of 120 million euros per aircraft, placing it at the high end of global procurement programs. Spain's role in FCAS is not marginal. Indrasistemas, a Spanish tech and defense firm, is leading the sensor systems development, providing Spain not just a customer stake, but technological leadership within the program. The industrial dimensions of this decision are also revealing. Spain's naval shipbuilding champion, Navantia, has been tasked with studying future carrier options to replace the current Juan Carlos I platform, which is limited to STOVL aircraft. With the F-35B off the table, Spain must now explore alternatives such as catapult launch-capable vessels that could accommodate jets like the Rafale M,
though such a platform would require several years to design, fund, and build, likely too late to bridge the fixed-wing gap left by the Harrier's 2030 retirement. In the meantime, the capability of the Spanish Navy to project air power from sea will contract significantly. From a fiscal standpoint, Spain's current defense spending stands at just 1.28% of GDP, among the lowest in NATO. The 2025 target, driven largely by alliance pressure, is 2%. While Madrid has committed to hitting this figure, it has rejected calls from Washington to go further towards the newly suggested 5% benchmark, which would have aligned with aggressive U.S. defense sales objectives. For Spain, allocating 85% of its new defense outlays towards European programs makes both political and industrial sense. It insulates the country from over-reliance on a single foreign supplier, particularly one prone to policy volatility, and ensures that investment recirculates within its domestic and regional economies.
But the trade-off is significant. Without the F-35B, Spain's Navy will likely face a fixed-wing capability gap beginning in 2030, as no European STOVL jet exists today or is on the horizon. Even if a future FCAS naval variant is developed, which is not guaranteed, it would arrive at the earliest in the mid-2040s. That leaves a minimum decade-long window in which the Juan Carlos I carrier would have no jet complement and would operate as a helicopter-only platform, limiting the country's maritime power projection in a theater increasingly defined by hybrid and contested naval domains. In sum, Spain's pivot is rooted in a complex calculus. The numbers make sense from an industrial policy standpoint. The Eurofighter is immediately available, and FCAS offers a long-term roadmap to sovereign capability. But the interim consequences, particularly for naval aviation and fifth-generation parity, are not insignificant. This is the tension at the heart of Spain's decision: the pull of strategic autonomy versus the push of operational shortfalls. And at least for now, Madrid has decided the long game is worth the risk. The cascading consequences of Spain's decision to abandon the F-35 program are already beginning to materialize, first and foremost within its naval aviation posture. With the retirement of the AE-8B Harrier fleet scheduled for 2030 and no short takeoff and vertical landing, STOVL, aircraft on the horizon, the Juan Carlos I aircraft carrier will effectively lose its fixed-wing strike capability. While helicopters can provide limited support in maritime operations, they cannot fulfill the roles of fleet defense, aerial interdiction, or deep strike missions typically assigned to fast jets. Unless a suitable alternative emerges, either a redesigned carrier or a navalized European jet, the ship will revert to a helicopter-only configuration, reducing Spain's power projection at sea and altering the operational doctrine of its entire naval force. In the Air Force, the increased reliance on the Eurofighter platform introduces strategic vulnerabilities. While the Typhoon is a capable multi-role fighter, its lack of stealth, integrated sensor fusion, and digital battle network capabilities limit its role in modern, high-threat environments. Moreover, concentrating national air defense on a single platform reduces operational flexibility and opens up risks in the event of maintenance backlogs, delays in upgrades, or platform-specific vulnerabilities. The F-35 was not only a replacement for aging hardware, it represented a leap in survivability, reconnaissance, and electronic warfare. Without it, Spain is forced to stretch fourth-generation capabilities across increasingly fifth-generation conflict environments.
The interoperability gap also widens. With 17 NATO allies either operating or procuring the F-35, a shared technological base has become a de facto standard across much of the alliance. The ability to share data, conduct joint exercises, and operate from common logistical and maintenance infrastructure is significantly enhanced when aircraft systems align. Spain's absence from that network weakens its integration into coalition air operations and imposes higher burdens in terms of standalone training, command and control systems, and mission planning tools. That said, Spain's role in FCAS development offers a meaningful trade-off in industrial and technological terms. Through Indra Sistemas and other domestic contractors, Spain is positioned at the forefront of sixth-generation fighter development. This provides long-term strategic advantages in AI, drone swarming, stealth materials, and electronic warfare systems. But these benefits will only materialize post-2040, leaving an entire decade of exposure and uncertainty. The decision prioritizes future influence in European defense over present-day capability. Politically, the fallout is equally significant. Transatlantic relations have taken a clear hit. The Trump administration's aggressive push for increased NATO spending and its subsequent use of tariffs as leverage has heightened tensions between Washington and Madrid. By refusing to adopt the F-35 and declining to meet the U.S. proposed 5% of GDP defense target, Spain has signaled not only a divergence in procurement, but also in doctrine. It is openly resisting American pressure, even at the cost of short-term strategic harmony. Conversely, this decision is a major step toward European strategic autonomy. It strengthens the case for intra-European defense initiatives, for industrial collaboration across the EU, and for a defense architecture less dependent on Washington's political cycles. But the cohesion of NATO is not immune. As more European countries diverge from US-led procurement programs, interoperability, logistics integration, and unified strategic planning risk being diluted. For Lockheed Martin, the financial implications are tangible. The cancellation of a potential order from Spain adds to a growing list of procurement doubts from allies like Portugal and Canada. The company's recent $1.6 billion internal write-down, coupled with shifting geopolitical priorities, raises questions about the long-term trajectory of the F-35 program outside the U.S. and core partners. From an institutional perspective, major defense and economic agencies offer a sobering outlook. The IMF and NATO both estimate that Spain is unlikely to reach its 2% defense spending target before the end of 2025. The European Commission and JETRO continue to push for reshoring military production and building resilience within the EU's defense supply.